Hi, welcome to Topics in Macroeconomics. This topic is monetary policy rules. In a previous video, we examined how a central bank, such as the RBA, is able to set its policy interest rate equal to some desired or target value. We now want to consider what factors are likely to influence a central bank's target for its policy rate. Let's think about the ultimate objectives of monetary policy. In general, there are two key objectives, and these are typically a measure of the rate of inflation and some measure of the overall level of economic activity in an economy, most commonly measured by the unemployment rate or the output gap, where the output gap is an indicator of the difference between the actual level of output and potential output. We can think about a central bank setting their policy rate in response to these and possibly other economic variables. One way to summarise a central bank's behaviour is by a monetary policy rule. Let's take a simple example. Suppose a central bank only cares about the inflation rate. In fact, let's suppose that it has an annual inflation target of 2%. A monetary policy rule can be used to show how the central bank sets its policy rate in response to deviations of actual inflation from its target. We can represent a monetary policy rule by a simple equation. On the left-hand side of the equation, we have the nominal policy rate. And on the right-hand side, we have a constant, which we'll call the neutral policy rate, and a term which equals the difference between actual inflation and its target value, multiplied by a parameter alpha. Continuing with the example, we can see that what we call the neutral policy rate is simply the value that is taken by the policy rate when inflation equals its target value. The parameter alpha is a measure of the central bank's sensitivity to inflation. Alpha will be positive, which says that the central bank should raise its policy rate whenever inflation is above target, and of course lower it whenever inflation is below target. The size of alpha measures sensitivity, or how responsive a central bank is to changes in inflation. For example, suppose that alpha is equal to 1.5 and the actual inflation rate is 3%, while target is 2%. Then this says that the central bank should raise the policy rate above the neutral rate by 1.5%. We can represent a monetary policy rule on a diagram. Firstly, draw the axes. On the vertical axis, we'll measure the policy rate, and on the horizontal axis, we'll measure the actual inflation rate and the central bank's target value for inflation. Where the vertical axis cuts the horizontal rate, we'll measure the inflation target. To the left of that, inflation is below target. To the right of that, inflation is above target. We can represent the monetary policy rule by an upward sloping line, which cuts the vertical axis at the neutral policy rate. To illustrate how a monetary policy rule works, let's suppose that inflation rises above target to pi prime. We can then simply go up to the monetary policy rule and read off what the value of the nominal policy rate that the central bank will set, in this case I prime. We can also think about the responsiveness of a central bank to inflation, and we can show this by the slope of the monetary policy rule. Let's suppose that a central bank has a smaller value of alpha, or a value of alpha which is closer to 0. Then we can illustrate that with the green line that we've drawn on the diagram. Notice in this case, when inflation rises to pi prime, this central bank would raise the policy rate by less. In summary, monetary policy rules provide a simple model of central bank behaviour. In a following video, we will examine a widely used example of a monetary policy rule known as a Taylor rule. See you next time.